It's time for The Real Messiah with your host, Messianic Jewish author and scholar, Dr. Michael Brown. Here to open up the scriptures, answer your questions, and help you discover Israel's true Messiah. Join the discussion now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. That's 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Well, what a joy to be speaking to you in New York City tonight. I am actually in California. I've been speaking at a conference here this week, and now in my hotel room with our whole elaborate setup so that we can do quality live radio from wherever we are anywhere in the world. Not only so, we can also do a live stream video on Facebook too. So welcome to The Real Messiah. We're going to have a terrific broadcast tonight. We're going to look, as we do every week, at the weekly Torah portion, and we're going to focus tonight on Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, the famous confession of faith. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We'll look at that, break it down in the Hebrew, and see how that interfaces with our belief that Jesus, the Messiah, carries the very divine nature, that he is the divine Word made flesh. So we'll be opening that up. If you are a Jewish person listening to this broadcast, if you're in greater New York or anywhere in the world, you're listening to this, you're watching this, and you have a question, you differ with me about Yeshua being the Messiah, or you're not sure, or maybe you are what we call a Messianic Jew, a Jew who believes that Jesus is the Messiah, but you've struggled in your faith, some questions have been raised for you, and you're really not sure what to believe. Well, by all means, give us a call, 866-348-7884. Also, exclusively for everyone listening on WMCA, so whether you're in New York City, Long Island, and Jersey, but as long as you're listening by radio, on WMCA, we've got a free book giveaway. We did it last week. I want to do it again this week. Not yet. Don't call in yet. But in a little while, we'll be giving away a free copy of The Real Kosher Jesus. All right. Check this out. On the radio this week, I got a call during the day in my Line of Fire program during the day. A gentleman from Florida named Larry called the show. And he said he's a Jewish man. He's now a follower of Jesus. And his whole family is turned against him. His family is very upset with him. And he wanted to know what to say and how to reach them. And he didn't sound young. So I asked him, how old are you? He said 65 years old. And he's only recently in the last couple of years come to faith in Jesus, the Messiah. So I said to him, how did you come to faith? He goes, well, through you, Dr. Brown. And he proceeded to tell me the story that a guy had been needling him about me, so he decided to take whatever the challenge was, got on YouTube, saw some of my videos, and was led to faith in Jesus the Messiah. And as he got to read the words of Yeshua himself and saw how he died, he realized this is our Messiah. Well, not long after that, I was talking to a colleague of mine. He said, Mike, you're not going to believe this. He said, I got a letter from a conservative rabbi. He told me where the man was, from a conservative rabbi with a congregation. And he said, the man has now become a follower of Jesus the Messiah. Yeah, a conservative rabbi. Then, just, 24 hours after that, I got an email from another friend. These are both Messianic Jews. I get an email from another friend, and this friend points me to a video. And on this video, there is a rabbi ordained first, he got Orthodox ordination, then conservative ordination. And he's talking about how Messianic Jews believing in Yeshua are part of the redemption and had no problem with the possibility of Jesus being the Messiah. Friends, God's doing something among our Jewish people. And, I've mentioned this before, but it's a funny story. There are Jews who've come to faith in Jesus. And when they did, they thought that they were the first one ever. They thought they were the first one in the history of the world. And that God had revealed this to them, just like he gave Torah to Moses and through Moses on Mount Sinai, that this was specially revealed to them. And when they went and told our people would say, wonderful, we believe. That's not exactly what happened. They didn't get that reception, but their faith has been strong. All right, 866-348-7884. I want to go to the phones and speak to an old friend, J.B. Bernstein. J.B., great to have you on the air today.
Yeah, great being with you.
So, J.B., when did you, as a Jewish man, come to believe that Jesus was the Messiah?
Well, it was on I remember the exact date. It was June 16th, 1975. But I was really on a search before then. I wanted to know, is there truth? Is there a God? Who is he? Is he, does it mean anything to be Jewish? Is there any meaning to Israel? Is just all these questions. I was trying to find out why I was existing on this planet.
And so in the midst of this search, God surprises you with the answer that Yeshua, Jesus, is the Messiah. That was 1975, and you've been sharing that good news with our people ever since. Do you find there to be more openness among our people, be it in Israel, be it other parts of the world, be it in America? Do you find that there's more openness to Yeshua being the Messiah today than there was years back?
Well, I think there's always been an openness, and it's not everybody. In other words, it's you got to if you speak to enough people, there is always going to be one out of, I don't know what the stats are, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 10 that will say, all right, let's talk, let's dialogue, and that's been my experience, that there's a tremendous openness, but there's a tremendous amount of baggage and misunderstanding and miscomprehension, and to Jewish people, Jesus, he's a you can't follow him. It means betraying everything that being Jewish means to you, because of, and I believe it's because of the activity of the Prince of Darkness. He has done a splendid job of hiding him from his own people, because he's terrified of Jewish people getting a hold of the truth again, like they did in the first century, because what happened then is they not only changed the world, they turned it upside down. So the Satan is terrified of Jewish people getting a hold of really what it is. The Messiah is their inheritance. I mean, it's everything about being Jewish has to do with the Messiah and the redemption of the world. And if you can keep the Messiah's people from him, then you've achieved a great victory. But of course, that's not going to last. But and I think that if we are understanding how to effectively communicate the truth about Jesus, Yeshua, to Jewish people, and help them to see that in a certain way he has been disguised by the spirit of darkness. I mean, Jewish people may not even believe there is such a spirit of darkness and deception. So you got to start with square one. But I think that Jewish people, being intelligent for the most part and having an inner, I think a God vacuum in a way.
Yeah.
That a lot of them are going to be open if they haven't completely made up their mind that they're not going to be. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And friends, we just released our third video in the series called Consider This. This is a real eye-opener, 5.5 minutes. And it is simply asking the question, how did the church get cut off from its Jewish roots? It is a real eye-opener. You can watch it on my YouTube channel, Ask Dr. Brown, AskDR Brown on YouTube. Those that are watching this broadcast now on the Facebook page, the Ask Dr. Brown Facebook page, we have a link to it there. I just got a tweet from David Limbaugh, started watching it and loved it. We're getting others saying this is the best video we've ever done. A real eye-opener, and it goes hand in hand with what my friend JB is saying. In fact, in a moment, we're going to give away a free copy of The Real Kosher Jesus, which further underscores how the real identity of Yeshua the Messiah has been hidden from our people. But JB, let's say you are talking to a Jewish person, all right? And you know, they're mildly religious. They're not super orthodox, but they're mildly religious. They consider themselves observant people. They take the God of Israel seriously, and they say they're Jews, and you go to talk to them about Jesus, Yeshua. How do you start off? I mean, I know everything's different, and you're going to kind of sense the best way to interact with an individual. But is there a particular way that you think is good to start off? Or maybe here's a Gentile Christian that's listening to the broadcast, and they're right there in New York City. They have lots of Jewish friends. What would you tell them as far as a good way to start reaching out to a Jewish person?
Oh, well, that's a great question, and I'd love to answer it. I mean, it would be different. The way I would speak to a Jewish person would be different than someone that was born not Jewish, Gentile, that knows Jesus, to speak to them. And the way I would encourage someone that is not Jewish to speak to a Jewish person is to it depends on, whether you know the Jewish person for 5 minutes or for 5 years. Right, of course. There's a question I think that you want to ask. And I think, effective evangelism is more about asking questions than preaching at people. All right. It's more about trying to find out what the person you're talking to believes, what he knows. And so what I would say is, to begin, I would say, there's something that's really strong in my heart that I would like to share with you, if that would be okay, and ask them if they would be willing. I mean, that would be the first step. Is the person that you're talking to, is he willing to have a conversation with you about an important matter? You're not going to tell him what it is right away, and see what he says. And if he says yes, and what I would say to the Jewish person is, I want you to know something, that my life, the most important thing in my life, that I would really, if I had to make a choice, I would choose death over losing this thing. That is how precious it is. And I think that you would kind of strike their curiosity and then say, and I want you to know that this most precious thing, which is really more valuable than life itself to me, first belongs to you before it ever belonged to me. All right, I'm just going to jump in here. So someone's listening to us right now. They're a Christian. They love Jesus. They want to share their faith with a Jewish person, but they're thinking, how can I do that? I mean, Jewish people, they're chosen people, and a lot of them know the Bible well. The religious Jews know the Bible well, and they think Jesus is like foreign and different. And you're saying that this Christian say, hey, there's something so precious to me. It's more important than life itself, but it belongs to you first. It's yours first. This is not just a ploy. This is not some semantic game. This is true, that the Gentile gets the Messiah after he first came to the Jewish people. So that's a truth that really gets someone thinking. Okay, so keep going. And then I would say, and I want you to know, and you look at this Jewish person in the eyes, and I believe that if your heart is prepared, that you would do well to have tears in your eyes as you speak to him, as you say, I want you to know that I love, I worship, and I serve your God. Mm-hmm. Those are powerful words. And the thing is, Jewish people have never heard these kinds of things from Christians. I love, I worship and I serve your God, and say, well, there is only one God, and he's your God. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it is him that has changed my life. And he is this most valuable thing. This most valuable, he's not a thing, but he's a person that has changed my life forever. And I would rather lose my life than lose him. I think you'll blow a Jewish person's mind by just saying those things.
And JB, you have advocated that Yeshua was wrongly condemned by our people, not by the whole nation, but by representative leadership, and that we should reevaluate that. Now, there's actually a movement in Israel among some religious Jews that either believe in Yeshua or are open to reconsider, saying that we need to reevaluate his trial. Come from that angle. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, the fact is that there were many times you could read in the gospel accounts that the leaders of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and I emphasize the leaders, those who were the religious political power brokers. They were the ones that wanted Yeshua, Jesus, dead. He was stepping on their toes. The people were flocking to him. And how do we know that? You remember when he raised this dead, these guys, these brokers.
Hey, hang on, JB. We are having a slight problem. Your connection was cutting out there for a moment. So if you're on a cell phone, just check your connection, make sure that you're in a good place and you're speaking right into the phone. But you were saying that when Lazarus was raised from the dead, that this was a direct threat to some of the religious leaders. Look, everyone can relate to this.
Yeah,
that
said,
good business for your competitor is a threat to you.
Exactly. In other words, the people were going after Yeshua. In other words, they were losing
the Jewish people
because
the Jewish people.
Yes, these were the people that were, in the Gospels. It was all about the Jews. It happens in Israel, and it was a Jewish drama.
Yeah.
And and so they said we have to do something about it. And I think their language was, the world is going after him. Mm-hmm. We're going to lose our people. We have to do something. They were terrified. And another thing is, there were many times that the leaders of the Pharisees and the Sadducees wanted to arrest Yeshua, Jesus, but they didn't because they feared the people.
The Jewish people.
They feared a riot.
Yep.
Yeah, well, they weren't afraid of the Indians. They weren't afraid that the Chinese were going to riot.
Yep.
They were afraid of their own people.
Yep. Yeah, so again, what we have to realize is that there are some of our people and only some of the leaders who were instrumental in rejecting him. And there were other religious Jews, there were Pharisees and others that followed him. Acts, the 6th chapter, said many priests came to believe in him. Yeah, this is very significant. All right, stay right there, JB. Friends, if you're listening on WMCA, so only if you're listening on the radio on WMCA, not if you're watching on Facebook or somewhere else, but if you're listening, this is exclusively for our WMCA listeners in Greater New York. All right, so you're listening on 570 AM right now. I want to give you a free copy of my 250-page eye-opening book, The Real Kosher Jesus. The number one book that I've written to give to a Jewish person, to open that person's eyes as to who Jesus Yeshua really is. Number one book I've written to give to a Christian, to help that Christian realize who their Savior and Messiah really is. Caller number 7, 866-348-7884, 866-34-TRUTH. Caller number 7, listening on WMCA. The book is yours. All right, so JB, back to you. When a Jewish person recognizes that Jesus is the Messiah, does that mean now that they're no longer Jewish and they have converted to Christianity. Is that what it means?
Well, I would say it's the exact opposite. Because if Jesus is the Messiah, and I'm 100% sure as you are that he is, well, there's only one Messiah. And the Messiah was promised all the way beginning, through Moses and all of the prophets of Israel. He is the hope of Israel. He is the probably the most important figure in the Hebrew Bible. And so embracing him not only is not an indication that you've converted to another religion, but it's an indication that you have fully, for the first time in your life, become obedient to the God of Israel, and you are being faithful as a Jew. And that flies in the face of the opponents of the Messiah. But so what? Because, one of the things that I like to say is mostly in the history of the Jewish people, it has been the minority who has been right. The minority has been faithful. Case in point, Joshua and Caleb were the only ones that came out of Egypt that entered the promised land. Everyone else fell in the wilderness because of unbelief. And a new generation entered Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, and what's interesting, JB, when we look at, say, the Hasidic movement today, so Lubavitcher Hasidim, who are very outgoing and seeking to reach other Jews and bring them into Jewish tradition, or the Satmar Hasidim, who are more closed in terms of the way they live, but obviously very devoted to their lifestyle, and Babov Hasidim and Ger Hasidim. When you look at them, their numbers total are hundreds and hundreds of thousands. And as a Messianic Jew, as a Jewish believer in Jesus, you can think, well, there's so many of them, and they're so passionate, and there's so few of us. But what's interesting is when you go back to their origins, that Messianic Jews today are a much larger movement than the Hasidic Jewish movement in its origins. So all that to say that numbers can be very deceiving, and that there can be growth that comes and is sustained and grows and multiplies. There can be growth that remains where it's the minority. I mean, right now, worldwide, religious Jews, so ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox Jews, are maybe 10% of the total Jewish population. Does that mean that they're wrong because they're 10%? If they were 2%, would they be less right? So ultimately, we can't be influenced by numbers. Many times it is the remnant. That's been the pattern. In Elijah's day, there were 7,000 who didn't bow the knee to Baal out of the entire nation of northern Israel. So we need to say we're going to follow the truth regardless of numbers. But the amazing thing is more and more Jewish people are coming to faith in Jesus the Messiah, and there's more and more recognition of this reality. We're not going anywhere. We've been here for centuries. We're still here. Hey, JB, we've just got a few minutes before our break. What would you say to a Jewish person who's struggling? They're seeking they think, okay, I read the books, I read Dr. Brown's books, and he makes some good arguments, but then the rabbis make good arguments. And I'm trying to figure out who's right, and how can I say I know better than the rabbis, or I know better than how would you speak to that person?
Well, when you read the scriptures, there's a very strong word from God throughout the scriptures not to trust in man. And so I would say, don't trust in Dr. Michael Brown. Don't trust in the rabbis, but be open and realize that if you are fair, I mean, God, he actually speaks to, through Isaiah, says, come now, let us reason together. So God wants you to come to understand so that you can see. The only way that you can really know this is if you see it. And if you are determined to love the truth, no matter what it is, no matter what you encounter, and you pursue him according to what the Word of God says, you will find him. Those who seek him, you will find him. And so I would say just to be open, not to make up your mind, not to have preconceived judgments toward anything, but just be a person who loves the truth. And you'll find the truth. And I believe that you'll find out that the Messiah, who claimed that he is the truth, that you will encounter him and that you will experience his presence as well. That it's not just knowledge, but it's a life-changing experience. When you come into contact with God, it's a game changer.
Yes, so friends, let's remember that our God is a living God. In fact, when Yeshua was asked about this, about the resurrection of the dead, he gave an interesting comment to those Jewish leaders that denied the resurrection of the dead, because there are different Jewish groups with different beliefs. But he pointed out that God said, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, meaning not the God who was their God when they were on the earth, but he continues to be their God because all live to him, and he is the living God. So we're not alone. We're not just stuck trying to figure out arguments. Who's smarter? Who knows the Hebrew better? Who's a better debater? Who's got the more interesting traditions? We have direct contact available to us to the living God, and if we'll earnestly seek him, you say, how do I do it? You cry out to him where you are. You read what we agree on. Traditional Jews, Messianic Jews, we agree that the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, that's God's Word. So read that and say, God, speak to me. God, open my heart, open my mind. Help me to see the truth about the Messiah. And if you're sincere, God will meet you. And then I would also recommend praying for courage to follow the truth wherever it leads, because there are often consequences for following God and his truth. JB, it's been 43 years now since you've been a follower of the Messiah. You've gone through lots of challenges in life, as everyone has. You've often been rejected for your faith. Is it all worth it?
It's beyond worth it. And my faith is stronger now than it ever has been. And I'm just thrilled and just amazed that God would actually reveal himself to me. You know, it's 2018. We're not talking about biblical times. Mm-hmm. But this is the most incredible thing that can happen to a human being. And the fact that I'm Jewish makes it even more mind-blowing because, who would have known? Who would have known? Like, I always heard about this man named Jesus. All I knew is he was Jewish. He had long hair and a beard and all.
Yeah, seemed like a hippie. And find out that he's the Messiah. Hey, JB, we got a break here. Great talking with you. Thanks for sharing that with all of our friends. God bless, man. Thanks for joining us.
It's time for The Real Messiah with your host, Dr. Michael Brown. Join the discussion now by calling 866-34-TRUTH. Here again is Dr. Michael Brown.
Thanks, friends, for joining us on The Real Messiah. This is Michael Brown. Just a few minutes from now, we're going to dig into this week's Torah portion, and we're going to focus on the issue of the unity of God, the oneness of God. Look at a fascinating Talmudic interpretation of Deuteronomy 6:4, and then talk about how that works out with our belief that God is a complex unity, that God is a triunity. Is that in harmony with the idea that God is echad, that God is one? So we're going to look at that momentarily. First, we go to the phones. We'll start in Miami. Peter, welcome to The Line of Fire.
Oh, welcome. Am I speaking to Dr. Brown?
You bet you are.
Okay. You were in Israel, and I watched a video of you, and they asked you why you didn't wear a yarmulke. But I wasn't sure what you answered.
Yes, Peter, can I just ask your own background, sir? Your own religious background?
I'm Jewish.
Uh-huh. And
I went to a Jewish school where they taught me not to worship pagan gods.
Uh-huh. Good. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
So that's why we don't worship your pagan gods.
Ah. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'll come back to your question in a moment. But what had happened was, because I was in an area with a lot of Orthodox Jews, I actually had a kippah on, just like I would do if I was in a synagogue. And when someone said to me, you're trying to pose as a religious Jew, I said, of course I'm not. I said, you don't see a beard here, you don't see tzitzit, you don't see anything. I'm not trying to pose as a religious Jew. And I said, I can take the kippah off because I don't wear it as a religious Jew. So that sometimes I wear it, sometimes I don't. If it's appropriate in a certain setting to wear it, I do. Otherwise,
so
I don't.
Why don't you wear a kippah?
Well, it's
Jews
not
wear a kippah.
based
Why
on what?
don't you wear one?
Well, but because it's not
Right,
in the Bible. It's
right.
not in the Bible.
Right, it doesn't say in the Bible. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't say nowhere in the Bible to wear a kippah, so you shouldn't wear a kippah.
All right. So,
and I agree with you.
all right.
How
So,
do you like that?
oh, okay.
So now I'm asking you, why you worship your pagan god? Nowhere in the true Bible, I've read it all through, and nowhere does it say to worship Jesus, your pagan god. Nowhere.
Well,
I've looked all over the whole Bible, and it says nowhere does it say to worship a man god, your pagan man god. Nowhere.
I don't worship a pagan man god. I worship the one God, the God of Israel. So let me ask you a question. Has God ever appeared to human beings in the Bible?
Could be, but no one worshipped him when he appeared as a man.
Oh, sure they did.
In fact, one prophet beat him up.
No. Sure they worshipped him. When he appeared, yeah, Peter. When he appeared, of course they worshipped him. For example,
one person that worshipped your God when he appeared.
Abraham.
As a human being.
Abraham, Genesis 18. That the
Yes,
Lord
and
appeared, and Abraham bowed down and worshipped him.
Yeah, no, it doesn't say bow down and worship him. It just says bow down. Okay. Many people bow down in the Jewish Bible, okay? People bow down. Joseph's brothers bow down to Joseph. They bow down to Jacob. Many people have bowed down in the Jewish Bible.
Oh, okay. But you recognize that hishtachava, to bow down, is also used in bow down and worship. So you're saying that he doesn't...
Yeah, it says that in the end times you will bow down to Jews. It says yishtachava.
Okay. All right.
Rabbi Blumenthal told you about it, okay? And I was just listening to the guy, and you said you wrote books and everything, but you never say that Rabbi Blumenthal refuted all your books.
Well, of course he
Why
didn't.
don't you say that?
But because he didn't refute them. He tried to, but he didn't. Everybody tries to. You know how many people have? Okay. But hang on. We've posted 3 videos going back and forth. We've posted now about 175 pages of dialogue on Isaiah 53. So as I have opportunity, of course I interact with them.
Okay, I understand. I have a question for you on Isaiah 53. Can you answer?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, you said the person you were speaking to just now said that everyone was following your Jesus, but the Pharisees they took him off. It says in Isaiah 53. Verse 3, it says, he was despised and forsaken of men, a man of pains and acquainted with disease, and as one whom men hide their faces, he was despised and was esteemed him not. Okay? According to that guy you were interviewing, this was not your God. It said everyone loved him, and he didn't have any diseases, and he was not a man acquainted with a pain. Okay.
What does it say in verse 4? Could you just keep reading?
Surely our diseases he did bear, and our pains he carried, whereas we esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted.
Yeah, so in other words, when he was hanging on the cross, that's when verses 3 and 4 were fulfilled. That's when we thought he was suffering for our sins. That's when we all forsook him. Everybody forsook him. He was carrying our pains and our sicknesses as he hung on the cross. And that's when we all forsook him. Excuse me?
The verse doesn't say on a cross. I know you say that, but it says it was despised and forsaken of men, a man of pains. If you would say a man of wisdom, would you say that was for 2 days, 3 days he had wisdom? Okay?
So hang on. Would you like me to answer? Would you like me to answer?
Yeah, not lies that you made up. I'd like you to answer the truth.
I am. I'm telling you to keep reading what it says. That we thought that he was guilty of sin. We thought he was suffering for his sin when he hung on the cross. When was he suffering? That's the question. When was he suffering? When was he bearing our pains and our sicknesses?
All of our disease he bare, our pains he carried, whereas we deemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted.
When did we think he was being smitten of God? When did he suffer? He suffered when he hung on the cross. That's when he suffered. That's when we thought he was dying for his sins as a rebel instead of for our sins. That's what the text says.
No, the text doesn't say that. The text doesn't say cross. I read the text. Nowhere does it say on a cross.
It doesn't have to say. It doesn't. There was no such thing as a cross in Isaiah's day. Okay, cross didn't exist in Isaiah's day, but it talks about him being smitten.
And there was no Jesus Messiah in Isaiah's days.
Yes, correct. That's why he's talking about what's going to happen in the future. That's why he's telling us what's going to happen. And what you're doing is exactly what Isaiah 53 says. You're looking right at him and getting it all wrong. You're thinking that he's some kind of sinner who's suffering for his own sin, whereas he was dying for our sins.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you just another question here.
Yeah.
The first verse in Isaiah, it says, "Who would have believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?"
Yeah.
Can you tell me who is the speaker here and who is our report?
The people of Israel.
Who would have believed?
The people of Israel who are bearing the message. When you get down to verse 8, it speaks about Mipesha Ami, for the sin of my people throughout Isaiah, verse after verse after verse.
The Jewish report.
Yeah, Mihamin L'Shmotena. Who's believed our report about the Messiah? This is the Jewish people talking. This is our people talking.
What does it say about the Messiah?
Excuse me?
The report is already given out. It says, "Who would have believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?"
Yeah,
the arm of the Lord has not been revealed to you pagans. And the arm of the Lord has not been revealed to your God, to your Jesus. Okay?
Yeah, Peter, if you start in 52:13, it's speaking about the servant of the Lord, an individual who will be highly exalted. All right? He will be highly exalted, but first he will suffer terribly. Who's it speaking of? Who is highly exalted but first suffer terribly? Who is it that kings around the earth have been shocked when they find out the news that Jesus is the Messiah? This has happened through history. And now...
No kings have been shocked.
Excuse me?
When your God came, no kings have been shocked. I don't know how can you say.
They've been shocked for centuries around the world.
Many nations, kings shall shut their mouths because of him.
Yeah.
For that which has not been told to them, they shall see. No one saw it. No king ever saw your God die on a cross.
When they heard the report, they were shocked.
Okay, but it says
when they heard, but Peter, I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you. You seem like a very serious guy. You study this a lot. So Peter, around the world through the centuries, hundreds and hundreds of leaders, kings, kings of nations, kings of tribes, have found Muslims, atheists have found out the truth that Jesus was the Messiah and have been shocked because of it and have now put their trust in him and been changed. And this is how the Messiah is a light to the nations. He makes known the one God, the God of Israel, to the nations.
What light to the nations? The biggest murderers the world has ever seen were you Christians. How can it be a light to the nations? I don't understand. Do you know that most of the Nazis were Christians?
None of the Nazis were Christians.
Light to the nation.
None of the Nazis were Christians. A Christian follows the teachings of Jesus.
You want me to show you the report of America? Okay? America, the crime rate continues. You want me to show you the crime rate? There's a rape every 5 minutes in America. Okay? And that's a light to the nations?
No, to the extent.
I don't understand.
Peter. Okay, very simple. Genuine followers of Jesus have been an extraordinary light to the nations. It was followers of Jesus like Corrie ten Boom who rescued Jews from the Nazis. Okay, that's why there's a street of righteous Gentiles in Israel recognizing them.
Right.
It's Christians around the world. It's Christians around the world, sir. Hang on. It's Christians around the world who have built.
The crime card continues to
Hey, Peter, tell you what. If you listen, you could learn. It's a great, great principle. It's hard to listen when you're talking, okay? So I love the questions that you're asking, and I'm thrilled that you are tuning into the broadcast. That's why we're on the air, to talk to folks just like you, all right? 100%. So Peter, let me just ask this in the interest of time.
Funfa, as we call it in Judaism, you are not a light to the nations, okay? Pedophile priests, hundreds and thousands of them, that a light to the nations?
Hey, Peter, tell you what, how about we talk about our Jewish people in exile for 2,000 years under the judgment of God? How about we talk about the temple still not being rebuilt after 2,000 years? It's because of our sin, sir, our Jewish sin. Okay, so look, I could repeat to you every anti-Semitic lie out there. I could repeat you every anti-Semitic lie out there. You could point to false Christians. All right, let's just talk about facts here. It is followers of Jesus who have brought the news of the one true God around the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of millions. This is a fact. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of people who were once idol worshippers, who were prostitutes, who were drug addicts, who were terrorists, who were violent atheists, who were false Christians, who were devoted Muslims, Hindus, who are now worshiping the God of Israel through the message of Jesus and through Christian missionaries. They have built more hospitals. They have built more schools. They have done more to help hurting humanity than any other group on the planet. Yes, very wonderfully, they have been a light to the world. And Jesus warned about hypocrites and warned about false followers and warned about wolves in sheep's clothing. Very simple. So is the presence of one hypocrite or 100 hypocrites going to get me to stop listening to the truth about God or the true stories of hundreds and thousands of others? So, Peter, you're in kind of a bubble here, and you're hearing one side of an argument, but not really seeming to listen with an open heart. Have you read my book, The Real Kosher Jesus? If not, Phil, our screen caller, is going to come on. And yeah, Phil, you in answer to the question, yes, we can give Real Kosher Jesus to that other caller. But as soon as you get a chance, get on with Peter and find out, Peter, do you have my book, The Real Kosher Jesus? If not, let me send it to you as a gift. We won't put your name on any mailing list or anything like that. Okay? All right. Now, let's take a look at this week's Torah portion. It is Ve'et Hanan. This is Moses crying out to the Lord for mercy that he be allowed to enter the promised land. And God says no, starting in Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 22, and then going into the beginning of the 7th chapter. And it's here within this passage, this week's Torah portion, that we have the famous words of the Shema. So this is Moses telling the people of Israel, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." When a traditional Jew will say this, he'll close his eyes and say the word Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, focusing all of his attention and energy on the idea that God is one. Now, I want to open that up. I want to open up that verse. I want to discuss the meaning of Echad, and then I want to address it in terms of how Jesus could be the divine Messiah if God is one. Wouldn't that be multiple gods, or making a man into a god or a god into a man? Let's focus on that question. Now here's something very interesting. If I look, for example, in the New Jewish Publication Society translation, it offers this translation: "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone," meaning that one, Echad, that one alone. For example, David says that about Solomon in 1 Chronicles 29, that my son Solomon, him alone, Echad, that one alone. And that the emphasis through the scriptures is that Yahweh, our God, is the only true God. He alone is God. In other words, the primary statement is not as to his nature that he is one as opposed to 2 or 3 or 10, all right? The primary statement is that he is our God, he alone. And there are some rabbinic interpreters that understand this verse the same way, as we have in the New Jewish Publication Society version. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Now, there's an interesting account in the Talmud. It's also in some other rabbinic literature, Pesachim 56a in the Talmud. And it's talking about how the Shema was recited and when there were pauses in words and what words were spoken with it. And listen to this tradition. It's what's called a midrash. This is a homiletical tradition. Damar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, as Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, Vayikra Yaakov el banav, Vayomer heasvu v'agida lechem. So this is going back, according to this midrashic, this homiletical interpretation, to Genesis 49, when Jacob calls out to his sons and says, gather together and I will tell you. Bikesh Yaakov liglot vanav ketz hayamin. So he intended to talk to his sons about the end of days. But the Shekhinah, the divine presence, departed from him. Amar Shema chas v'shalom yesh b'mitati pasul. And he said, perhaps, heaven forbid, there's some blemish that came out from my bed. And he said, Ka'avraham sheyatsa mimenu Yishmael, like Abraham, from whom came Ishmael, ve'avi Yitzchak sheyatsa mimenu Esav, or like my father Isaac, from whom came Esau. Amrulo banav, his son said to him, Shema Yisrael, hear us, Israel, our father, right? Shema Yisrael, hear us, Israel. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The Lord is our God. Yahweh is our God. Yahweh alone. Amru, they said, Kishem she'ein belivcha ela echad. They said to him, just as there is none but one in your heart, kach ein belibenu ela echad. So also there's none in our heart except one. And then, be'oto sha'an, that very moment, patach Yaakov Avinu, that Jacob opened his mouth, va'amar Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. At that moment, obviously the divine presence reassures Jacob, and he speaks the words, blessed be the Lord whose glorious kingdom is forever and ever. The words that are traditionally recited after the Shema. So I cite that only to say that there are rabbinic understandings that God's oneness means him alone. We worship him alone. But let's say we read it in the more common traditional Jewish way. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, the Lord is Echad. There are some Messianic Jews who say the word Echad there means a compound unity, and therefore it speaks of God's triunity. That's a mistake. Echad in and of itself does not mean a compound unity. On the other hand, it does not mean an exclusive unity like Yachid, like an only son. Yachid would mean. Where's the first time in the Bible that the word Echad occurs? Well, it's in Genesis, the first chapter, that there was morning and there was evening and there was morning, Yom Echad, one day. So the first day, Yom Echad, is evening and morning. That's one day. Interesting, has two components. The next time it's used is in Genesis, the second chapter, about Adam and Eve, that the two become one. So two parts making one couple, one unique substance. And then we have, for example, the building of the tabernacle in Exodus 35, that all the different parts of the tabernacle make one tabernacle. So to say that God is Echad, yes, he's the one and only God, but it doesn't tell us the nature of his exclusivity. In other words, the mystical Jews will talk about the Sfirot, these different emanations of God. And they're not persons, but they're emanations, different aspects of his character and being. And they'll speak of these different emanations, but the one and the same God. We can read about the Shekhinah. We just did, the divine presence. So the Shekhinah is on the earth, while the Father sits enthroned in heaven and fills the universe. And according to Jewish tradition, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, goes into exile with the Jewish people. Goes into exile with the Jewish people, and there are some Hasidic Jews, before they perform a commandment, they pray for the reunification of God, because the Shekhinah is separated from God, so there's somehow something disjointed in the divine nature. Fascinating, isn't it? And then there's the rabbinic reference to the Memra. This is the divine word, that because God is so exalted, it's difficult to think of him speaking directly to someone or interacting directly with someone. That Rabbinic Judaism came up with this concept of the Memra, the word that goes forth from God and communicates truth from God, and by which God makes the universe, to the point that Jacob in Genesis 28 says that if the word of the Lord will be with me, then the word of the Lord, the Memra of the Lord, will be my God. So in the very same way, John 1, in the beginning was the Word, the Memra, and the Memra was with God, and the Memra was God. That's something that's found, that concept, in Rabbinic Judaism. No, Rabbinic Jews did not worship Jesus. No, Rabbinic Jews were not Trinitarians in the sense, but these concepts are concepts that certainly overlap. And what I'm saying is, we believe in one God only, who is complex in his unity. The Father, who's the source of all things, remain hidden. No one can see him. Doesn't it tell us in the Hebrew Bible, no one can see him and live? And yet, what does it say in Exodus 24 about Aaron and Moses and his 2 eldest sons and the 70 elders of Israel? Doesn't it say that they saw the God of Israel? In Exodus 24, they saw the God of Israel, but no one can see God and live. How's that work? It's the Son who makes him known. Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles with a man, wrestles with an angel, and then he says, I've seen God face to face. Yes? I've seen him face to face. Peniel, that's when he names the place, face of God. I've seen God face to face, but no one can see God face to face. Exodus 33, God tells Moses, you can't see my face and live. What do the New Covenant writings tell us? No one has ever seen God. John 1:18, that's what it says. No one's ever seen God. It's not some pagan god that we worship like Apollos or Zeus, or coming down from heaven and walking on the earth around us. No, of course not. No, we believe in the invisible God who can make himself known, in the transcendent God who can become immanent right in our midst. So, the Father, unseen, 1 Timothy 6 says, no one has ever seen God, no one can see God, but the Son makes him known. And then the Ruach, the Spirit, works among us. Hey, friends, go to realmessiah.com. Check out the resources there. Back with you next week.